Welcome to Lady Red Crafting. Today, we're going to make some crafts using canning jar lids, canning jar rings, and your wine corks. So let's get ready with craft number 1. For this craft, we're going to use the canning jar lids. For this first step, I'm taking the wide mouth lid and I'm going to take a Sharpie pen and I'm marking 24 little dots around the perimeter of the canning jar lid. Next, we're going to grab our drill and drill out all of the holes. If you don't have a drill, you could nail the holes out using a nail and a hammer. It may be a little bit sharper on the back side, so just be careful if you do it that way. For the next step, we're going to grab 4 pipe cleaners, and I'm just cutting them into thirds. Once all the pipe cleaners are cut, I'm taking the piece of pipe cleaner and I'm sticking it through one of the holes. I'm going to then stick the other side of that pipe cleaner through the other hole and twist, and I'm going to repeat that for the remainder of all of the holes around the canning jar lid. When you flip over the canning jar lid, it looks like you're sewing little stitches into the canning jar lid. Now that that's complete, we'll move on to the next step, making the petals. For this next step, we're going to take some burlap ribbon. This burlap ribbon is from Walmart, and we're going to cut them into 5.5 by 5.5 inch squares. You will need 12 of these squares to make all of the petals. To construct the petals, I'm going to go ahead and fold them into a triangle, and then we will wrap them together, all of the corners, and fluff that out to make a cute petal. Once that's done, I'm going to grab a small rubber elastic and I will just tie that around each of the petals to hold them into place. And we're going to keep repeating the step until we make a total of 12 petals. Just wanted to take a moment and say thank you for watching. If you're new to the channel and you like what you see, please hit that like or subscribe button below. Thank you. It's now time to attach the petals. We're going to take these burlap petals and I'm going to lay them down in between the pipe cleaner, and we're going to twist them and secure them into place right around where that elastic tie is. And I'm just going to repeat this step for all 12 petals. While we're attaching the flower petals, what is your favorite flower? Leave a comment down below and let me know. My favorite flowers are lilacs. We now have all the petals secure, and it's time for us to make the center of the flower. To do this, we're going to go ahead and grab a wide mouth lid, and I'm grabbing some scrap fabric, and I'm just roughly cutting a square that will cover the wide mouth lid. I'm then going to take some polyfill, and this part didn't get on camera, but I added some hot glue to the top of the lid, and then I added the polyfill on top so it would kind of stay into place and it makes a puffy little ball. Next, we grab that piece of fabric and we're going to wrap that around and glue that into place. It'll look almost like a pin cushion when you're done. Once everything is glued down with hot glue on your little center for the flower, we're going to attach that to the flower that we've made. So to do this, we will use hot glue. First, I'm going to just trim off any excess burlap so that it's a little bit flatter in the center. And then we're just going to hot glue the center piece right inside. And what I'll do is I'll use some of my pink larger clips to kind of clamp down the center and let it sit for a little bit longer so it dries really well. So while the flower is drying, I'm going to go ahead and grab my Waverly Antique Wax, and this is from Walmart, and we're going to take it and I just put a little bit on a paper towel and I'm just wiping it down on a dowel, and this will be the stem of our flower. It's now time to put together the flower. We'll remove the pink clips from the flower and we'll realign all of the little petals. Once that's complete, we'll grab our dowel, and I'm going to draw a line of hot glue down the center of the canning jar lid. We will use this to secure the dowel. To make sure that the dowel doesn't move, I add a piece of burlap ribbon over the top of the dowel and glue that down as well. I'm just going to use my pink clip again to just make sure that stays into place, and I let that dry for a few minutes. While that's drying, I grab a piece of white felt and another wide mouth canning jar lid, and I'm going to draw a circle around the canning jar lid onto the felt, and then we're going to go ahead and cut that out. With this flower, what I wanted to do is just make it look nice from the back side and the front side, so that way wherever you place this flower in your house, you don't have to worry about the back not looking nice. So it's not going to be as decorative as the front side, but you could do the fabric again if you liked on the back side, but we're just going to use some felt this time. So we're going to take our hot glue, and I'm just going to put some hot glue all over the top of the dowel on the back side of that canning lid. And I add a tiny bit of the poly stuffing, and then we're going to go ahead and glue the felt over the top of the poly stuffing. And for me, I use the seal of the canning jar lid on the back side as my guide to where to put the hot glue. And the pink clips are a great extra hand as you're trying to glue all of this down. So while the flower is drying, I'm going to go ahead and make a container to put the flower into. For this step, I'm using a wide mouth canning jar, and I'm painting it with the Waverly chalk paint in the color Mineral. I did get this at Walmart. And then once that jar is completely coated, I'm going to let that dry for a little bit. Now to get some dimension to this jar, I'm going to use my white Waverly paint, and I'm just going to dry brush all around the outside of this jar. After that, I'm going to add some of the truffle Waverly chalk paint and do the exact same thing and just dry brush over the top. If you get too much of the truffle paint on there, you can go back over that with some of the mineral paint. Once that's complete and that's dry, let's go ahead and put together this flower. Taking my hot glue, I just drop some hot glue down to the bottom of the jar, and then I'm going to place a small piece of floral foam at the bottom of the jar, and we're going to go ahead and stick the dowel into that flower foam. Then add a little bit more hot glue to try to stabilize the flower as best as I can, because it is quite heavy with all of that material at the top. Next, I grabbed some paper bags and I just ripped them up and I filled up the jar, so I was using something easy for the filler. And at the very top of the jar, I'm going to add some decorative rocks. Recognize this ribbon from the Dollar Tree. I made a quick bow that I'm just going to hot glue right onto the top of the dowel there. And here you have it, a beautiful handmade flower with burlap. Time for craft number 2. For this craft, I'm going to go ahead and grab a wine cork, and I'm just going to slice it with a razor blade about 1/4 inch in. Once that piece of cork is sliced, we're going to set it aside. For the petals of this flower, I'm going to use the faux leather from the Dollar Tree craft section. And I'm using some scrap pieces of leather that I had used for a different craft earlier. And I grabbed a piece of cardboard and I just cut out a small template to make a petal. So when I was tracing the template onto the faux leather, I flipped the faux leather over to the back side to do the tracing of the petals. Once all the petals are traced, I will cut all of them out. For this craft, you will need 18 petals. Once you have all of your petals cut out, we're going to grab some toothpicks. And I'm going to take these toothpicks and we're just going to trim about 1/4 inch off of each toothpick. You want to keep one of the sides with a point because you're going to use that point to stick into the wine cork. So once we get all of these cut, you'll need 9 for this craft. We'll go ahead and start putting the petals together. To do this, we're going to take the hot glue and we're going to flip over the petal. We're going to then put a line of hot glue, add the toothpick, and then it looks like a little fan. Once that's complete, we'll add some additional hot glue and we're going to add a petal over the top. So you want the nice faux leather on the outsides of these petals. So that's what you will see. And a quick note here, when you're gluing the toothpicks into these petals, you don't want to leave a huge edge on the outside. So you just want about 1/4 inch of the toothpick sticking out, and you want the pointy side as the side that's sticking out, because we are going to add these into the wine cork. Now that we got all of our petals made, I'm going to grab that piece of the wine cork that we cut earlier, and we're going to take each petal and we're just going to go ahead and insert them into the sides of the wine cork. And we will just repeat that step until all 9 petals are in the wine cork. So now we have a beautiful flower. Our next step will be to make a cute stem. For this next step, we're going to use some wood stems from the Dollar Tree and a bamboo skewer. I'm grabbing my drill and I'm grabbing the drill bits. I'm finding the correct drill bit to match the skewer. Each skewer is a little bit different, so I recommend that you measure your skewer directly to the drill bit. Once we have the correct drill bit, I'm going to go ahead and drill a 1/4 inch hole into the wood stem. And for this, if you don't have a drill, you could also use a nail. Once that hole is complete, go ahead and double check to make sure your wood skewer fits. Now, we're going to go ahead and put everything together. Our first step will be to insert the skewer into the wine cork. Once I've done that, I'm going to determine the size of the skewer. How tall do I want my flower? I'm grabbing some shears. These ones were from the Dollar Tree. They were just in the garden section. And I'm just going to go ahead and cut that skewer. Now we're going to insert that back into the stem. Now if you cut this right, you shouldn't need any hot glue, but if your hole is a little bit too big, you might need some hot glue to make sure it stays secure. To finish this off, I use some off-white ribbon and I just tie a quick bow. This craft would be great for a craft party. What I recommend is drilling all of the holes ahead of time in the wood stems and having all of the other materials ready to go. You may also want to slice the wine corks ahead of time depending on the age of your participants. And now we have a charming little flower that you can set anywhere for decor. This works good for tier trays or on a shelf. Craft number 3. For this craft, we're going to use the wide mouth lid and ring. First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to paint my base. So for this base, I'm using a Dollar Tree clay pot and I'm painting it in the color white from Waverly Chalk Paint. And I'm just going to give a nice coat all around the whole flower pot and inside the rim about 1 inch down. So now we're going to set that flower pot aside and we're going to start working on the flower. The first step here is we're going to take the wide mouth ring and we're going to drill a hole the size that will fit a bamboo skewer in. Next, we're going to take our favorite fabric squares. I have 2 squares that I'm using from the Dollar Tree, a blue stripe and a blue checkered, and I'm going to cut them in 1 inch strips that are 11 inches in length. Once I've done doing that, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do a knot around the outside of the ring. For this craft, you can use any fabric that you like, any color, extra scraps around your craft room to use up some of your supply, whatever you think would look nice. So we're going to continue tying knots of fabric around this canning jar ring until the whole entire ring is completely filled with fabric petals. This step reminds me of a happy sunshine. Now it's time to make the center of the flower. we're going to grab our wide mouth lid and some fabric. I'm going to cut a small square to cover the wide mouth lid. Also going to grab some polyfill. We're going to hot glue some polyfill on top of the lid, and then we're going to take that piece of fabric and cover the polyfill. We're going to grab our Happy Sunshine and we're going to stuff the center of the canning lid into that sunshine. And then I'm just going to hot glue the extra white fabric to the back side of the lid. Now we'll set that aside to dry. Let's grab a bamboo skewer, and I'm going to paint this in Waverly White, but you can leave it the same color or stain it, whatever you would prefer. And then I'm going to add that into the little hole that we had drilled earlier, and I'm going to stuff that through all the way to the top of the canning lid. So when you see it on the back side, it's going to be like a brace down the center of that flower, and I'm going to hot glue that into place. While that's drying, I'm going to grab a piece of felt, and I'm just going to trace a ring on the felt so that I know what to cut. And we're going to go ahead and cut this piece of felt, and we're going to cover the back side of the flower so you can't see the stem. To attach the felt, I'm just going to use my handy dandy hot glue gun. So now that that flower is complete, let's set that aside while we finish the pot. For this pot, we are going to go ahead and cut the floral foam small enough to fit inside that small pot. Once we've pressed that down into the pot, I'm going to go ahead and take a piece of the fabric that we used earlier, and I wanted to use it just like a ribbon trim around the pot to tie everything into place. So I just hot glued it so that you couldn't see any of the edges, and then I hot glued it to the pot itself. Now it connects at one spot in the pot, and it looks kind of like a gathered connect, but I wanted something there to cover that. So what I decided to use was a wood slice. It covers that spot just perfectly and looks almost like a button. To give it a more finished look, I decided to whitewash that wood slice. So I'm using my Waverly chalk paint in the color white, and I'm just covering the front side of the wood slice and the sides, letting some of the rustic bark still show through. Now it's time for the final touches. Let's add the flower into the floral foam. Once that's secure, we're going to go ahead and add some Spanish moss over the top to cover the foam. And with the white paint on the inside rim of the pot, you shouldn't have any problem with the brown terracotta pot showing through. The final step here is making a cute burlap bow. So what I'm going to do is use some burlap ribbon from the Dollar Tree, and I make a loop and hot glue that loop together. Once that loop is glued together, I'm going to cut the tails. I'm going to cut one long strip and make a V shape. And I dovetailed these just because I like the way that looks. I'm going to scrunch it up in the center, then attach it with a small piece of pipe cleaner. Once that's attached, I'll cut off any excess pipe cleaner. And I will take another small piece of burlap ribbon and hot glue that around the center of the bow just to cover that up so we don't see it at all. Just give your bow a quick fluff and then hot glue it to the stem of your flower. Now we have a delightful flower. Thank you for watching. I couldn't do this without marvelous viewers like you, so please hit that like button down below. Have a great night. Bye.